Every night when we fall asleep, our bodies take over. Our hearts keep beating, our lungs keep breathing, and our brains quietly control thousands of life-sustaining processes without us ever thinking about them. But imagine what would happen if one day your brain simply stopped remembering how to breathe. Not because your lungs were damaged, not because your heart failed, but because the automatic system responsible for breathing just stopped working. This is the story of a healthy 42-year-old man whose life changed overnight when doctors discovered that his brain was slowly losing control over the most basic survival reflex the human body has: breathing. And solving the mystery would lead doctors into one of the rarest neurological conditions ever documented. Daniel Reeves was the kind of person doctors rarely see. Healthy, active, no medical history worth mentioning. At 42 years old, he worked as an accountant, lived with his wife and 2 children, and followed a predictable daily routine. But everything started changing one night in late October. Daniel's wife woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. Something felt wrong. The room was quiet, too quiet. She turned toward Daniel and realized something that immediately made her heart race. He wasn't breathing. For several seconds, she watched his chest. Nothing moved. Then suddenly, Daniel gasped violently and woke up, confused and frightened. They both assumed it was a nightmare. But the next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Within a week, Daniel's wife noticed the pattern repeating again and again. Daniel would fall asleep normally. Then suddenly, his breathing would stop. Not for a few seconds, sometimes for 30 seconds or longer. Then his body would jolt awake with a deep, desperate gasp. By the end of the week, Daniel was waking up dozens of times each night. He became exhausted. At work, he struggled to concentrate. He began experiencing headaches, dizziness, and overwhelming fatigue. Finally, his wife insisted he see a doctor. At first, the explanation seemed obvious: sleep apnea. Millions of people have it. But Daniel's case was about to challenge that assumption. At the sleep clinic, Daniel appeared completely normal. His lungs sounded clear, his heart rhythm was perfect, his oxygen level during the exam was healthy. Still, doctors scheduled a sleep study. That night, Daniel was connected to dozens of sensors. Electrodes monitored his brain waves, straps tracked his chest movement, sensors measured airflow, oxygen levels, heart rhythm, and muscle activity. But what doctors saw that night left them deeply confused. Normally, sleep apnea happens when something blocks the airway, but Daniel's recording showed something completely different. Every few minutes, his breathing simply stopped. No airflow, no chest movement, no effort to inhale. His body had simply paused the breathing process entirely. There was no obstruction in his airway, which meant the signal to breathe was never being sent in the first place. Doctors initially believed the problem would only occur during sleep, but the next day, something even more concerning happened. While talking with a nurse, Daniel suddenly paused mid-sentence. The nurse noticed something unusual. He wasn't breathing. 10 seconds passed, then 15. Finally, Daniel inhaled again and continued speaking as if nothing had happened. He hadn't even noticed. Daniel was transferred to intensive care for monitoring. Doctors began investigating every possible explanation. Neurologists ordered an urgent MRI scan of his brain. If a tumor, stroke, or structural problem was interfering with the brainstem, the scan should reveal it. But when the results returned, everything looked normal. No tumors, no stroke, no bleeding. Yet Daniel was clearly losing the ability to breathe automatically. One neurologist began considering an extremely rare disorder: central hypoventilation syndrome, sometimes called by its haunting nickname, Ondine's curse. According to an old European legend, a water spirit cursed her lover so that he would forget to breathe the moment he fell asleep. In medicine, the condition behaves almost exactly the same way. Patients lose the automatic control of breathing. Their lungs remain healthy, their airway stays open, but the brain fails to send the signal to inhale. Adult cases are incredibly rare, but Daniel's symptoms matched almost perfectly. Doctors ordered genetic testing for mutations in a gene called PHOX2B. This gene controls the development of the autonomic nervous system, the system responsible for involuntary functions like breathing and heart rate. A week later, the results arrived. Daniel carried a mutation in the PHOX2B gene. For decades, it had remained silent, but now it was disrupting the neural circuits responsible for automatic breathing. Daniel was diagnosed with late-onset central hypoventilation syndrome, a condition so rare that many physicians never encounter a single case in their entire careers. Unfortunately, there is no cure. Once the automatic breathing system fails, the brain cannot easily restore it. Doctors needed a way to replace the missing signal. The solution was a remarkable device called a diaphragm pacemaker. Surgeons implanted electrodes near the phrenic nerve, the nerve that controls the diaphragm muscle responsible for breathing. The device sends electrical impulses that stimulate the diaphragm to contract rhythmically. In other words, it artificially creates the breathing signal that Daniel's brain can no longer produce. At night, the pacemaker ensures that Daniel continues breathing even while asleep. His life would never be exactly the same. But thanks to early diagnosis and modern medical technology, Daniel was able to return to a relatively normal life, a life that now depended on a small device doing something most people never think about, reminding his body to breathe.
Medical explanation. Breathing is controlled by two systems in the body: the voluntary system, which allows us to consciously control our breathing, and the automatic system, controlled by the brainstem. Most of the time, the automatic system works silently in the background. It monitors carbon dioxide levels in the blood and adjusts breathing accordingly. In central hypoventilation syndrome, that automatic control fails. The brain no longer responds properly to rising carbon dioxide levels. Patients may breathe normally while awake, but once they sleep, the body simply stops initiating breaths. Without mechanical support or diaphragm pacing, the condition can be fatal. Lessons from the case. Daniel's case highlights an important truth about medicine. Some of the most dangerous disorders are not caused by damaged organs, but by tiny disruptions in the complex communication networks that keep the body functioning. A single gene, a single neural circuit, and suddenly something as automatic as breathing becomes impossible. The end.
Every second of every day, your brain performs thousands of tasks automatically. Heartbeat, temperature regulation, digestion, breathing. We rarely think about these processes because they almost never fail. But rare medical cases like Daniel's remind us just how delicate the systems of the human body really are, and how quickly something we take for granted can turn into a life-threatening mystery. If you enjoy exploring strange medical conditions, rare diseases, and real hospital mysteries like this one, consider subscribing for more fascinating medical stories. Because sometimes the most unbelievable cases in medicine are also completely real. Thank you for tuning in to MedLore. Stay safe.